Hello everyone, my name is Jaime Garzón. I am the Assistant Extension Professor and Forage Educator at the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. Today, I want to share with all of you some characteristics and some information about some species within the sorghum family, because those are warm season grasses that can be useful now that the summer is starting here in the state of Maine. In the summer, the air temperatures start to rise, and that could be something problematic for the grasses that we usually have in our pastures, because those are cool season grasses. With the increasing temperature, a physiological response of these plants is to increase also the photorespiration. And it's a problem because this physiological reaction will compete against the photosynthesis. Being that less photosynthesis will mean less carbon fixation or carbon sequestration, and with that also means less synthesis of tissues and less biomass accumulation. All of that due to the increase in photorespiration. A common name that we have for that effect is the summer slump, and that's why it's important to have other choices, other options or other strategies to deal with this decrease in biomass accumulation in that amount of grass that we have available for our animals in the pasture. So here in Maine, the sorghum family provides us good choices to deal with this decrease with the cool season grasses. The sorghum family have some species that they produce good amount of biomass. They are adapted to this increasing temperature because those are C4 grasses, and also they are adapted to drought. So actually we have some seeds available with this family in our market, and we can establish some pastures with these specific plants to have an extra biomass to give to our animals in this moment of summer slump. Our first option is the sorghum. As I said before, one of the things that we need to differentiate here is that in the market we will find two versions of sorghum. One that is a varieties that are designed to produce grain, to produce seeds, and the other ones that are for forage. The main difference here is that the forage varieties are designed to produce a bigger amount of leaves. So actually with that we have more fiber and more biomass to provide to our animals. Besides, the forage sorghum has a kind of different architecture in comparison to the grain sorghum, because in this case the grain sorghum is genetically adapted to retrieve those nutrients, to absorb it from the soil, and later put all of that in the grain. And that is very useful if we are collecting this grain to the market. But in our case, with our animals, we need that amount of fiber and biomass. And because of that, those second varieties are adapted to retrieve nutrients, but directed more in the leaf growth, and will delay also the production of seed heads. And that is good because we will have like a longer period when we can provide this biomass to our animals. With the forage sorghum, we are using this one mainly for silage. This is important to differentiate because even when these varieties are designed to produce less amount of grain than the grain sorghum, we need also those grains to produce a good process into the silage. We need those soluble carbohydrate for a good fermentation, for a good silage. But the difference here is actually we also need a good amount of leaves that will provide the biomass for our animals. That's why this forage sorghum could be directed more for the production of silage. The productivity of these varieties are usually similar to the corn. They are producing approximately 15 to 20 tons of green matter per harvest per acre. That will be translated in approximately 5 to 7 dry matter tons per acre per harvest. It's important to note that if you need to choose between having corn or sorghum, for a sorghum, to produce silage, it's always better the corn, because the corn will have better production of grains, less production of fibers, and that will mean a better silage on the future, a better anaerobic fermentation, and that will preserve more amount of nutrients through the fermentation and later with the animal intake. Even so, the sorghum is a good choice that you can have if you have a available path or available land that we want to use in summer and you want to produce biomass for later. The sorghum is a very good choice. It's important to note also that with sorghum you need to be careful with the accumulation of nitrates and the accumulation of prussic acid. The nitrates accumulation is something that is not usual that happens, but will happen after a stress event. So actually, for example, if we are having a very strong drought, these plants are adapted to drought, but very long periods of drought will affect those. So after this event of drought, that long event, so the plant is stressed, the plant is suffering because it's dry, and suddenly you have a good rain, maybe a fertilization with nitrogen, with liquid nitrogen. They will make that the plant will absorb a lot of this nitrogen, even in a rate that it cannot transform from nitrates to another products as amino acids or other ways to deposit this nitrogen in the tissues. When that happens, the nitrate in the plant will accumulate, and if you give these plants in a short time to the animals cannot deal with these concentrations. So actually that will impact their rumen and they will absorb this nitrogen to the blood. By doing that, we will see intoxication by nitrates. So to prevent this, the better choice that you have is after a very stressed event, you can check the amount of nitrogens into the tissues of your sorghum. You can send some samples to one laboratory that could analyze the concentration of those chemicals. And just by prevention, it's good to delay the delivery of this product, of this sorghum, to the animals if you are providing that fresh. That is because by doing that, you are giving the plant more time to process this nitrate and transform it in useful forms of nitrogen that the animal can absorb. The other threat that we will have with the forage sorghum is the accumulation of prussic acid. This usually happens in young plants and it's like a normal way to the plants to defend themselves against pests. So when that happens and the animals consume these plants fresh and young, that prussic acid will also accumulate into the animals, into the cows. And by doing that, that chemical will make that the animal drown because they will not be able to absorb the nitrogen they are breathing. So one of the main ways to prevent this situation is if you are providing sorghum, forage sorghum in fresh as grazing for your animals, it's better to wait at the moment that the sorghum is producing seed heads, because in that moment they are not accumulating anymore this prussic acid. The other option that is the more recommended is actually to make silage with the forage sorghum, because by the ensiling process and the anaerobic fermentation, those microorganisms will deal with these possible chemicals that could accumulate, and at the end of the fermentation we will not have problems with excess of nitrates or with excess of prussic acid. A final recommendation with the forage sorghum is if you are thinking to provide this to horses, be careful because they are more susceptible to lower concentration of nitrates and prussic acid. So the recommendation here is if you want to give that to these animals, just go with the silage option, just go to the preserved option and try to avoid give fresh sorghum to the horses. Our second option is the Sudan grass. This is a plant that belongs also to the sorghum family. It came also from Africa and it's also adapted to dry soils, to drought. So the main difference that we have here is that the Sudan grass it produces less stems, and with that is more adapted to the grazing and could be used better for the production of hay. The Sudan grass have also a very good nutritive value, and it has a very growth rate. So actually after the planting, well, having good conditions in the soil and with the weather, the Sudan grass could be ready to be grazed or to be harvested 45 days after the planting. And our third option is the sorghum Sudan grass. This is a hybrid between both genetic material that came from Africa, and it has some good characteristics from each of those species. So actually the sorghum Sudan grass will produce more biomass than the Sudan grass, but the stems will be wider and stronger. That's why the main recommendation for this species is being used for green shop or for cut and carry. You can also use the sorghum Sudan grass for direct grazing, but you need to take into account that by doing that, the amount of residues into the pasture will be higher, because those plants are tall, and when they enter into that specific pasture, they will knock down and trample to a lot of material. That's why one of the better recommendation is before of that, just go cut the material and carry the material where the animals are. It's like a more efficient way to use this grass. And you can expect finally a productivity to approximately 15 tons of green matter or fresh matter per acre per harvest. You can see that actually is a little higher than the Sudan grass. That could be translated in approximately 5 tons of dry matter per acre per harvest. So to summarize this part of the video, if you want to take advantage of this species between the sorghum family, and the manage that you want to provide is for direct grazing, I will recommend you to go with the Sudan grass and maybe the sorghum Sudan grass. If you are planning to do hay, the Sudan grass is very good as well, and the sorghum Sudan grass will have a better productivity, but probably you will need a conditioner for that because the stems are wider. If you are planning to have a cut and carry, the sorghum Sudan grass is the better option, or even the sorghum. And finally, if you want to make silage, the recommendation here is to go with the forage sorghum. My name is Jaime Garzon, and if you have some questions, don't hesitate to contact me. Here is my email address, and you also can contact me at the University of Maine Cooperative Extension to my cell phone number.